I am Jacquelyn Melinek, and this is Michael Sonnenshein. Michael, how are you?
I'm great. Great to be here.
To start off, Michael is the former CEO of Grayscale, a longtime crypto veteran. You have been in the space for over a decade, which I don't think many people could say.
It's been over a decade, yeah. I'm still here.
You have also fought the SEC and won, which I also don't think most people could say.
No, but it was a team effort.
It was a team effort.
Yes.
That's true, yes. So given that you're not at Grayscale anymore, we'll get into that. But before we do, I feel like you have a plethora of knowledge, and I don't say that to everyone. So what are some of the biggest lessons you think you've learned, especially now that you're not there anymore? Like, what are you carrying with you since?
Yeah, I think what was so unique about the opportunity at Grayscale, both the business and the team that we built, was that we were trying to democratize access to crypto within existing financial rules and regulations. And so there was never any kind of proclivity to cut corners or try and fast track things. I think for us, there was always a need to ensure that we were using the best service providers, trying to do things thoughtfully, methodically, et cetera. And at times that was tough because there wasn't a rule book, and largely there aren't still rule books for how to operate compliant businesses within the United States in and around crypto. But I think that's also why Grayscale was such an amazing opportunity.
And why did you leave? I feel like I have to ask.
Sure.
And I'm sure some people here are wondering.
Well, I think it really harkens back to when I first got involved. A lot of people don't know, but I was essentially almost employee number one at Grayscale in 2014. And when I joined, it was really about Bitcoin. Would Bitcoin become a bona fide asset class? Would it be something that investors would want to have access to? And that's what we believed. And the crypto ecosystem, I don't even know if we could even say it was crypto ecosystem back then.
Like
it was largely just Bitcoin. And I think for us, there was this passion to build, and the Bitcoin community was inclusive and about opening up the system for more and more people and democratization. And I think, for us, the biggest journey along the way was really the SEC battle, which you mentioned, right? Which was to get an ETF to market and allow millions of investors to access Bitcoin through the protections of the ETF wrapper. And after we as a firm were able to accomplish that, this past January, I feel like I'm now back in that same kind of mindset where I have the crypto ecosystem kind of courting me and so many other people with new ideas, engineers that are building, new projects, founders and entrepreneurs that are actually creating new products and services that are solving real world problems. And so I've been kind of drawn back into the ecosystem, and I feel like over the last few months, I've almost been on a listening tour, if you will, kind of getting reacquainted with what everyone's doing, what everyone's building. And it's been really, really encouraging.
Okay, so what are you up to now?
That's a great question. So I've begun to advise a lot of businesses, mostly in the crypto space, but also somewhat in the fintech space. And so it could be everything from businesses working on infrastructure in and around crypto. We're certainly seeing a lot of efforts around tokenization. And, similar to, I think, what we experienced at Grayscale, for a lot of these businesses, there isn't a clear path to the rule book that they're supposed to follow or what their go-to-market strategy is going to be like. And so in the absence of, legislation and a lot of the things that I think the industry so badly wants, I've been a helpful sounding board for a lot of these entrepreneurs that are trying to build in a thoughtful and methodical way.
So would you say you're talking to a lot of American-based companies, given that, and I've had conversations with founders too, that they don't really want to stay here. They were born and raised here, but they also want to explore things overseas because of the regulatory uncertainty still that persists to this day. So how do you kind of address that? And then what is your thoughts on it today?
Well, so I think there's a lot of founders that I'm speaking to now who are trying to decide whether or not it's the right time for them to fundraise. Some of them, coming out of this most recent crypto winter, either their projects were recently started or their companies were recently funded. And I've been certainly, the one to tell them, having survived, if you will, 3 crypto winters over the last, decade plus, that it never hurts to have a rainy day fund. I'm certainly bullish on the asset class, bullish where things are going, but you never know when things are going to turn. And so I think some of the use of proceeds, if some of these founders do raise, a lot of them are thinking about whether or not to continue their operations here in the US, or this may be an opportune time to take advantage of perhaps some of the regulatory clarity they've found in other jurisdictions around the world.
So you don't tell everyone to just leave the US or stay? It's a mix of things?
Well, listen, I think crypto certainly has a home in the United States, and the introduction of ETFs certainly solidified the staying power of the asset class, the accessibility of the asset class here in the U.S., but we've got a ways to go.
Okay. And so given the current crypto landscape, do you think things are similar or different than, let's say, a year or two ago?
Things are vastly different.
I figured that would be the answer.
Than they were a year or two ago. It's hard to even kind of chronologically think about a year or 2 years ago because, in the real world, that's like 20 years, right? Well, so I think certainly the introduction of, I think our SEC lawsuit at Grayscale and kind of this broadening and opening up of the asset class was certainly a watershed moment for the industry. Many will kind of look back on the last kind of 9-10 months and say that was actually one of the catalysts that melted this most recent crypto winter. But there are a lot of parts of the crypto ecosystem that unfortunately haven't reemerged since this most recent crypto winter. So the landscape is different in that, spot trading, the landscape is still the same in the sense that spot trading is there. Certain exchanges that were once very important and very vital to the ecosystem aren't there, and we've now just seen those volumes move to other exchanges. Derivatives have continued to be built out. There's more and more contracts on, futures, things like that. ETFs have certainly changed the landscape. That was not here a year, 2 years ago. But then you have other parts of the ecosystem, certain parts of plumbing and other features that I know the institutional community really wants. So options trading, we're making maybe small incremental strides as an industry towards options on top of ETFs, which would be tremendous. But we also haven't seen the reemergence of a ton of prime brokerage businesses. There's several, but really the ability for users, for institutions, and everybody in between to be able to borrow and to lend within crypto is a vital, vital component to a really healthy market. And I'm excited to hopefully see some of those models reemerge.
Based on the conversations that you're having today with maybe people who don't want to be in the spotlight, they don't want their company saying that they're getting involved in the space, but they're talking to you directly saying, hey, Michael, we want this. We would love if we could get a financial version of this on the blockchain. What are those conversations and what do these institutions want?
Yeah, so there's certainly a big push around tokenization. And I'm seeing it everywhere from tokenization of real estate to tokenization of kind of more esoteric assets that historically take a long time to settle. I'm seeing it around equities. I'm seeing it around loyalty. That's probably where most of the pitches and most of the business models kind of coming through my inbox this day are. I'm excited about tokenization. I think if anything, what Bitcoin and what a lot of the other L1s and even some of the L2s have proven is that we now have this scalable infrastructure on which to build these types of applications. I think for some folks, the biggest difficulty around tokenization remains the on-ramps and the off-ramps, right? How can you ensure that the token that you're issuing is still going to be traded on a secondary basis into the hands of the appropriate type of investor? How can you ensure that even if you do have those guardrails, that because this is a crowd that likes to innovate, that token's not then going to be wrapped so that it can be democratized and opened up to other types of investors? So I think over the next kind of year and a half, you're going to start to see some of those on-ramps and off-ramps begin to get solidified. So some of those applications will be a little bit more able to be realized.
Mm-hmm. Backstage, we were talking a little bit about lending in crypto. Can you talk about like the promise there and what you're advising right now?
Sure. So what I am seeing now is, especially with prices rebounding as much as they have, investors that are eager to take out loans against appreciated crypto positions. It could be Bitcoin, it could be Ethereum, et cetera. Does that make sense? Sure it does, right? There are a lot of investors who have made good money on their crypto positions. They'd like some relief against those assets so that they can do a home renovation or buy a car, or maybe they're paying taxes. Hopefully they're paying taxes, right? Things of that nature. But what I haven't seen as much yet is kind of the interest-bearing side of things. And so a lot of businesses are looking at some of the prime brokerage models, some of the borrowing and lending desks from before the most recent crypto winter, trying to learn lessons from them, and trying to, perhaps make a more prescriptive methodology as to how they offer relief and hopefully how they can build out the interest-bearing side as well.
And what about IPOs? Do you think Web3 businesses in the U.S. should be looking or gearing up to IPO, given that we've seen a few do it before, but the market may not be prime for it right now?
Well, so I think actually the market is ready for it. It's just a matter of, are our regulators ready for it, right? And so, today when I think about the available opportunities on the public markets here in the U.S., you have investors buying public companies like the Coinbases of the world or MicroStrategy. You have investors buying and investing in different publicly traded Bitcoin mining businesses. And you certainly now have Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs. But there is a pretty healthy pipeline of some unicorn businesses around the crypto ecosystem that would love to come to the public market. I'm confident that is a matter of when, not a matter of if. But it's certainly, I don't think you're going to see anything, here for the next few weeks, certainly until this election gets decided and we begin to see not only who our new president's going to be, but also, how much of a priority crypto is going to be on their agenda.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that was another question. Of course, I had to ask, what is your regulatory outlook right now in the U.S. and how will the U.S. election potentially impact that one way or another?
Yeah, well, I have to think about my own crypto journey to answer that question, right? Because I've been now through several presidential elections during crypto. And if you would have asked me, I don't know, a year or 2 years ago, would a former sitting president speak at a Bitcoin conference?
I would guess no.
I would tell you no. If you told me that the industry and the ecosystem would be rallying around crypto issues and getting those in front of candidates with the force and hopefully with the maturity that this industry can bring, absolutely not. So I'm encouraged by all of the activity that we've seen, honestly, no matter who becomes the next president, because this is a little bit of a kind of wait and see. At the moment, you're seeing a lot of rhetoric on both sides of the aisle, and that's just conversations. When we'll actually get down to brass tacks is on the other side of an appointment, who will be leading the SEC? Will we see further legislation or won't we? But in the meantime, I think that certainly even in some of the swing states, crypto has now become a really big issue because it's something that I think over 1 in 4 Americans owns. So I'm encouraged that it's here to stay and it is, an issue that's coming up in the election.
Do you think it should be nonpartisan? Because personally, that would probably get it the most adoption, in my opinion. And it's becoming polarizing in the sense if it goes one side or the other.
Well, I have to say, when I think about the work that I did with my team on Capitol Hill leading up to the Bitcoin ETF decision, it's a really, an issue that's gotten bipartisan support. I think that there are sitting congressional leaders on both sides of the aisle that want to see the U.S. continue to be a hub of innovation. And it's not just around crypto, it's around new technologies like AI and others. So I actually think it's one of the only issues perhaps these days that really does have bipartisan support. Just how much of a priority it'll be, I think will differ depending on who our next president is.
Okay, fair enough. Regulatory conversations aside, what do you think are some other hurdles that the industry needs to jump over to get more institutional adoption?
Yeah, well, I think certainly one of the conversations that keeps kind of showing up time and time again is around, whether or not it's time to revisit things like the Howey test and what constitutes a security or not. I think there are amazing businesses, many of whom have been built here in the U.S., that would love further clarity so that they know that there are actual guidebooks and rules that they can follow to compliantly list or not list certain assets. I think that we will also see some movement, hopefully, around crypto custody. SAB 121. We should be able to have, Bitcoin and other assets custodied in just the same way that other assets are custodied. These are assets that investors of all shapes and sizes are touching or using or part of their portfolios. And, I think those are probably the two things that come most to mind.
Okay. Do you have a crazy take about what could happen in the next 12 to 24 months?
Well, let's see. We're at a crypto conference, so I'm sure folks would love to say that, I think crypto is going to all-time highs, but I've been around a little too long to know that it's never good to make price predictions. And what I would say is that I'm optimistic. I think the kinds of businesses that I'm seeing, the kinds of projects that are launching, the kind of integrations I'm seeing between crypto native companies and financial services incumbents is really, really encouraging. I think back to 2017, 2018, when the very first credit card companies or banks maybe were publicly getting involved in the space, we've come so far from that so quickly. And I think a lot of that integration is only going to probably further weave crypto into the fabric of, the financial services landscape.
Mm-hmm. We talked a little bit about it in the beginning, and obviously you played a pivotal role in the adoption of crypto ETFs, specifically spot Bitcoin ETFs, and then eventually the Ether ones. Given that was months ago, which is a very long time in crypto, in my opinion, how do you kind of see it continuing to scale, inflows coming in, and the future of crypto ETFs as a whole?
Yeah, it's definitely no secret, and I think this is a catalyst that a lot of folks are looking out for, which is today, by and large, those new products are available mostly only to retail investors and institutional investors. And there's a whole really important segment of the middle part of the financial services landscape where you have financial advisors, private banks, wirehouses, et cetera. By and large, to the best of my knowledge, a lot of the access to that segment of ETF users has not been turned on yet. And when that happens, you could start seeing these types of products not only introduced directly to underlying clients, but you could see them begin to make their ways into model portfolios. I'm certainly excited and optimistic that options on top of Bitcoin and on top of Ether spot ETFs will happen. And that can also be another catalyst that leads to product creation, right? Things like income producing, leveraged, inverse, all the kind of permutations that you typically see around commodities and other types of products.
What do you think the timeline is for that middleman adoption?
Probably over the next quarter or two. I know that there's a lot of teams that are working on those integrations, and I know that there's certainly demand on it from that segment of the market, and usually those two things come together.
Okay. Before we wrap things up, we talked about how you're advising, but what do you really want to do next? Where do you see yourself going?
It's a good question. I have really only been kind of sitting in this capacity over the last 3 or 4 months, meeting with businesses of different sizes, of different levels of maturity on kind of their growth trajectory. Ultimately, I love to build. I'm an operator, and I love to build teams and build products and be able to successfully execute on kind of the go-to-market strategy around them. So it'll be hopefully sometime over the next couple quarters that I kind of figure out what that next part of the journey is. But for now, I am more than content engaging with the ecosystem in the way that I am.
I'm sure we'll see you being an executive at another company sometime soon, and we'll have to sit down and talk again.
Yes, we will.
Michael, thank you so much. And
thank you
everyone for listening in. Yeah.